So, if there's not any other questions, yes.
Broden, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Sharing your experience.
Yes.
My curiosity is that it seems like there's a lot of Americans that are of color, black, Spanish, whatever, and they seem to have a propensity to vote for the Democratic Party.
Right.
What is your view on this, and how can we change that?
Colossians chapter 2, verse 8. It's a deception, folks. And the deception is this, is that most who are Democrats, and believe me, there are a lot of Democrats in America, the Democrats believe that that party is for the little guy. And so does the African American community. The African American community became Democrats in the 1960s. Before then, they were Republicans. Martin Luther King was a Republican. They became Democrats in 1960 because of Lyndon Baines Johnson. Got involved and brought the Civil Rights Bill into fruition. And we attached to that, and we've been there ever since. And they have, of course, used the federal government to spend money and to create what I call a generation of dependency upon the government. A lot of our people are on the public dole. And they're on there because the government has forced that on them. They killed innovation and creativity in our community. They did that. Frankenstein was only Frankenstein because Dr. Frankenstein made him. The black community is in the mess that is in today because the federal government did it. They did that through their social engineering and through the development. Listen, in the 1960s, they were putting sterilants in our water. They were sterilizing our women and our little girls. They were doing that, and they were forcing abortion in our community. The government did that to us. There's a documentary that I am on that we created called Maafa 21. Maafa is a Swahili word that means terror, and 21 means the 21st century. In that, we document empirically how the eugenics movement in America is responsible for Hitler, is responsible for the killing of the Jews. The eugenics movement is responsible for targeting the African American community to abort our babies. And right now in America, listen to me, I want you to listen carefully. The reason why I say the salvation of this nation is in the baby boomers is because we have killed too many of our young people. We don't have many of them. Demographers tell us it takes 2.1 kids per family in order for a family to replace itself. In America, in the majority community, it is down to 1.8. Demographers call that irreversible reduction. It takes 100 years to turn that around. That is, if white folks in America said, okay, we want to get that number back up to 2.1, it will take you 100 years to turn it around. In the black community, the number is 0.9. That's decimation. They have convinced us to commit suicide, and we're doing it. In Washington, D.C., out of every 2 pregnancies, 1 ends in abortion. In New York City, out of every 2 pregnancies among black women, 1 ends in abortion. At the end of this day, when the sun went down, 1,500 black babies were lynched out of their mother's womb. Planned Parenthood has 80% of its facilities in the African American community. They receive from our government $350 million a year to do their work, and they are targeting my community. That's not by accident, that's by design. These Darwinists are exercising a philosophy among us, but they're looking at you. I was reading something, Brave New World. How many of you read that book, Brave New World? Huxley says this. He says, there will come a time when we will be able to genetically control what type of person that we can produce. And we can determine who will go into servitude and who will be a part of the elite. That's what he said back in the 1960s and the 1950s. He won a Nobel Prize because those elites were listening to him and they believe him. I was reading just earlier this year, and I hate to go on, but I'm full of stuff, men and women. I want to tell you this. This is serious business. Earlier this year in a magazine article, it was called Designer Babies. How many of you saw that article? Designer Babies, where they now can determine what kind of baby that you can produce. If you wanted 6'4", blue eyes, blonde hair, you can get that and genetically manipulate that. And at the same time they're talking about manipulating genes, they're talking about we need an evolutionary leap. And the only way that we can get an evolutionary leap is to get rid of some of these useless eaters and Christians believing in this God. And so we're targeted, whether you know it or not. And if we stand still long enough, you'll see them begin to target us and move us into FEMA camps and other things and stuff like that. How many of you know they're building FEMA camps around the country? Friends, this is serious business. And I'm not here to frighten you. I'm here to say, get your muskets and get to the ramparts. There are more of us than it is of them. And we still got the Constitution. As long as we've got that Constitution, we can fix this. Mark Levin says this. He says, conservatism is the antidote to tyranny, precisely because its principles are the founding principles. Huh? Sound like he just gave me the remedy. If, in fact, the antidote to tyranny is conservatism, and conservatism is conservatism because it believes in the founding principles, then it means that you and I ought to return to the founding principles and pick them up and begin to bludgeon and bully them back with the principles that made this nation great. So the remedy is clear to me. It's clear. I don't think we need to be around there wringing our hands thinking what we should do. You need to pick that Constitution up, open it up and look at it, reacquaint yourself with the founding principles of self-determination, personal duty and responsibility, freedom of speech. And somebody needs to tell the pastors that. You have freedom of speech that is protected by the First Amendment. And so when the IRS says you can't have your 501c3, you say, here's your 501c3, take it. I will speak out the truth in this church and among my people. I did that in 2007. Recorded my sermon, mailed it to the IRS and said, I support John McCain, and I preached it today. Come get me. Come and get me. And I was bold and audacious for one reason. I had the First Amendment standing behind me. And the First Amendment trumps the IRS.